everybody, Ty here. Hope everyone's doing well. Happy Friday, by the way. We did talk about this in brief detail yesterday, but didn't really go over any model data, so this is kind of a means to catch up here, more or less, with this video here. We do have some very good news about this severe weather event. This does not have any sort of hatch risk, so as of right now, wouldn't be expecting any sort of widespread, significant severe weather like we saw last week. Last week, as we know, was a pretty rough week. Widespread severe event, over 100 tornadoes reported over the course of those 3 days, and then significant wind reports, hail reports, etc. But this event is definitely on the lower end of the spectrum here. The main areas of concern are particularly over from Jackson, Tennessee, throughout Mississippi, including Jackson, Mississippi, or just on the edge of it, is in slight risk here. And then we're stretching all the way back towards parts of eastern Texas as well. But the main threat with this at this point in time definitely is taking the shape of a damaging wind event. Towards the southern end of the spectrum, I think there is a possibility that we could maybe get a tornado or two, but nothing really guaranteed there, as well as the chance for hail. Obviously, we're not in that 3-day time frame, so of course we're not going to get a clear look at the hazard till tomorrow, which will be the final upload video leading up to the event. We may live stream this depending on how conditions trend throughout Sunday morning, but this might be one that I might pass on because I've been kind of grinding these last couple of weeks here. But like I said, we'll just see how this plays out and we'll go from there, kind of play it by ear. What we're seeing on model data, though, definitely only further concludes that this is highly likely to be a damaging wind threat. You can actually kind of see the frontal boundary be kind of setting up here, even in the upper air maps here. It's towards this region here where I'm seeing the first signs of diffluence, and it looks like it happens around mid-afternoon. So we go further along into the run here, you can actually see this line beginning to dip off to the southeast with a south-southeasterly motion here. And as we get later into the evening, we'll eventually see this race off to the southeast here. As we go further along, you'll notice, as we look at other maps here, the instability is going to start to weaken. So while these storms will continue to grow, it's going to probably be their peak's probably going to be just right about at sunset, or maybe a little bit after here. That's going to be optimal time to get any kind of severe weather. As far as the shortwave is concerned, at the mid levels of the atmosphere, not anything super prominent until we get late into the evening. We start to see a shortwave begin to develop over here towards Tennessee. Like I said, I really think this will be our peak time for storm development. As we go further along, things don't really look like they uptrend too much beyond that point here. Obviously, there's some other models we could look at, but this is kind of the best look I've had out of anything that I've been looking over the last 72 hours here. So we look at the low-level jet that's available throughout the day here. Things are pretty limited, and this is probably what's going to help keep that tornado threat down. There are some, like I said, there are some areas to the south here where we do have our winds up to about 34 knots at the low-level jet region. So I'm not saying that's a 0% chance. It's a non-zero. I wouldn't be surprised to see a 2 or even a 5% area kind of pop up here. Maybe in the heart of our slight risk, or maybe towards the western side of it, off to the east here. Not really going to be expecting as much. Low-level jet does kind of ramp up, of course, as we get later into the evening, so that always is a wild card. But as of right now, I wouldn't be expecting a whole lot from the kinematic perspective here in regard to tornadoes. Now, I've gotten a little bit ahead of myself here. Wanted to actually look at the dew points really quickly, because while the kinematics are kind of lacking, or wind profile, what you want to pay attention to is this moist sector here. This moist sector still looks pretty solid. As we get into the early morning, you can kind of see the first signs of it really building in, and it really makes a nice push into parts of southwestern Tennessee here before all is said and done. Like I said, the most ample moisture definitely seems to be towards Mississippi into Louisiana, parts of southern Arkansas, and then also into Texas as well. Of course, as we get later into the evening, we start to see that downtrend already beginning to occur here. This is what's also going to help keep severe weather limited. I do think that there will be chances for damaging winds further off towards the east as well, and there may be a subsequent marginal or slight risk the day after this pops up here. So still plenty to keep an eye on, but like I said, the severe weather threat itself just doesn't seem to be anywhere near as significant as last week, which is great news at this point. So looking at our instability now, and we're just going to kind of fast forward here. You can see by the time we get into the early afternoon, we get some good readings over here towards East Texas in particular, right around our time of initiation. I don't know if these storms really fire off too quickly further towards the south due to a lack of forcing. However, as we get further into the evening, you can see these cape values really starting to spike up here. Keep in mind, this is a mixed layer cape. Our surface cape matters a lot. But by the time we get towards peak time here, we can see almost about 4,000 joules per kilogram for cape here. But the big limiting factor in regards to tornado threat, again, is really going to be the kinematics, especially at the lower levels. We're kind of struggling here in comparison to the last event. We're seeing shear readings of about 12 to 18. Usually you want to be in the 20 to 30 range here. So definitely lacking a lot within the low-level wind shear department here. Lapse rates are kind of subpar as well, and that could keep some of the storm activity limited. But considering the fact that we have plenty of downdraft cape available, I would go as far as to say that the damaging wind threat's pretty high. Also, we have pretty impressive hail parameters too to go along with this. So this will be a good event for damaging winds and hail more so than anything else as of right now. As you can see, if we look further off towards the east here, we do have instability available, but it's very limited at this point in time. And as we get later into the evening and we lose that daytime heating, it only drops off further from that point. We were to go ahead and take a look at that surface base cape here. The values aren't really that much different. Slightly lower in a lot of cases, unless you're over towards East Texas where the environment's just really amped up here. But outside of that, pretty much a similar deal. These two different levels of cape always matter here because that surface-based cape is definitely influential in tornadoes, even though it doesn't really tell the full story of the entire atmosphere here. Mixed layer cape is really good for looking at all three hazards, I would say at this point. But one thing that I'm always watching here, especially with events like these, because they can be pretty sneaky, is taking a look at the supercell composite. Obviously, this isn't an end-all, be-all model parameter, but I do see some potential over here. Mid-grade numbers over towards west central and central parts of Louisiana, over towards extreme eastern Texas, where those values are starting to get pretty high. We're getting into the 16s. This can go up as high as about 50. So we're not halfway into the scale or anything like that, but definitely something to keep a close eye on. Any sort of cell mergers also could have an increased chance of producing a brief tornado as well. So now that we've looked at that, let's take a final look at what our timing is based off of composite reflectivity here. There's basically a simulated weather radar here. So this is us going through Saturday into Sunday. And like I said, it doesn't really look like we have a super impressive look on here. As we get later into the evening, this consolidates into a pretty strong line here. Another big limiting factor looks like we're going to have a very messy convective mode as well. So supercells seem a little less likely to form here. Again, we'll kind of go over this tomorrow to get a better idea of what to expect as we go further along here. This is the first of several convective models that are just now starting to get in range for this event. So there's some clarity, but not quite enough yet. We'll get a much better picture of what to expect as we get into Saturday. So we'll gear up for that video tomorrow, and we'll see what happens on Sunday, depending on whether or not we end up live streaming this. But that being said, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your Friday, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Till then, take care of each other. See you next time.